On the outside, everything looks right. You laugh together, you make plans, you agree on politics, parenting, pasta sauce. There's no chaos, no yelling, no betrayal. Friends admire your connection. Your families nod in approval. You tick every box of what a healthy relationship is supposed to be. And yet, something doesn't feel whole. There's a quiet ache, a loneliness that doesn't come from conflict, but from the absence of depth, a kind of emotional solitude, wrapped in the comfort of routine. You're not unloved, not mistreated, but you're not truly seen either. This is the paradox of the perfect relationship, the kind that works on paper, but struggles in the heart. It's a relationship where everything functions, but little truly moves you, where you're always together, yet still feel alone. Philosopher Martin Buber once made a powerful distinction between I-it and I-thou relationships. In an I-it connection, the other person is useful, reliable, agreeable, cooperative. But in an I-thou relationship, the other is fully met, not just as a role, but as a whole, living, emotional presence. And it's here, in this gap, that many perfect relationships quietly suffer. Because functioning well together is not the same as being emotionally bonded. Loving someone isn't the same as being known. In these relationships, everything feels managed. You talk, but not vulnerably. You touch, but not with hunger. You support each other, but you don't challenge or deeply inquire. The love becomes a kind of performance, polished, predictable, polite, but not intimate. The silence in these relationships doesn't scream, it doesn't explode, it doesn't demand, it simply lingers. In the car rides where the conversation doesn't go beyond errands, in the dinners where eye contact is frequent, but emotional contact is absent, in the sex that's consistent, even generous, but feels more like habit than desire. You start to wonder, is this it? You feel ungrateful for even thinking it. After all, so many people are in worse situations, but comparison doesn't erase the truth of what you feel. You're not starved, you're undernourished. And over time, that lack of nourishment takes a toll on your spirit. We rarely talk about this kind of loneliness. It doesn't fit the traditional script of relationship suffering. You're not fighting, you're not broken, you're just unfulfilled. But not in the dramatic way that calls for a breakup, more in the soft, numbing sense that something essential is missing. It's what existentialist thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir wrestled with, the tension between structure and freedom, duty and desire. When a relationship becomes too structured, too safe, too functional, it can feel like you're living beside someone rather than with them. The tragedy here is not the absence of love, it's that the love has stopped evolving. It has ceased to become a dynamic, growing entity. It has solidified into form, but lost its essence. You still show up, you still care, you still plan for the future, but the emotional aliveness, the raw vulnerability, the feeling of being met, those things fade into the background, and slowly, the connection begins to die, not with a bang, but with a sigh. Sometimes this kind of relationship is built on unspoken agreements. You don't challenge each other too deeply. You avoid the uncomfortable truths. You maintain peace by staying on the surface. But true connection can't thrive in shallow waters. You need depth, and depth requires risk. In a perfect relationship, there's often an avoidance of risk. No one wants to disturb the balance. But without friction, without emotional honesty, without the courage to say, I feel unseen, the relationship slowly drifts into polite detachment. There's also shame, because admitting you're lonely in a seemingly healthy relationship feels like betrayal. You start questioning yourself. Am I being too needy, too dramatic, too idealistic? But this is not about perfectionism. It's about authenticity. What you long for isn't unreasonable. It's not fantasy. It's the deep human need to be felt, heard, known. As psychologist Carl Rogers wrote, when someone really hears you without passing judgment, it feels damn good. That kind of presence can't be faked, and its absence is always felt, even in the most polished of partnerships. So what do you do when everything looks perfect, but your heart whispers that something's off? You start by listening to the whisper, not judging it, not silencing it, just listening, because in that quiet ache is the beginning of a truth, not necessarily about ending the relationship, but about what needs to be reclaimed within it. Maybe what you miss is not your partner, but yourself, the version of you who once felt wild, expressive, desired. Maybe what you need isn't more dinners out or shared hobbies, but deeper conversations, fuller presence, emotional honesty. The first step toward repair is naming the loneliness. Saying, "I feel unseen," is not an accusation. It's an invitation, an offering. But that step takes courage, because it might reveal cracks where you hoped for smoothness. It might expose truths your partner is not ready to hear. And yet, without that risk, you stay in the most seductive of traps, a relationship that looks whole, but feels hollow. And isn't that a far lonelier place to be? There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from always being okay, from pretending everything's fine because, by all appearances, it should be. You have a partner who listens, who remembers your birthday, who supports your goals, who doesn't betray you, belittle you, or abandon you. And yet, you lie in bed next to them and feel a silence that words can't quite reach. This is not the loneliness of abuse or neglect. It's the loneliness of comfort, the kind that creeps in slowly, masked by politeness and emotional predictability. You smile, you share, you make love sometimes, but you both know something deeper has been lost. It's the loss of mystery, of spontaneity, of the electric charge that once connected you in a way that felt both primal and poetic. Philosopher Alain de Botton once noted, "Compatibility is an achievement of love, not its precondition." But in many perfect relationships, compatibility is all that remains. You coexist in harmony, but harmony without depth can become a kind of soft disconnection. And when you're in it, it's hard to name, even harder to admit. Because who are you to complain? You're not unloved, just unseen, not abandoned, just unrecognized, not fighting, just fading. And the fading is the hardest part, because it rarely announces itself. It shows up in small ways. You stop asking big questions. You stop sharing the dreams you had at midnight. You censor your sadness to keep the mood light. You joke instead of confess. You plan trips, but avoid talking about how distant you feel. You start choosing peace over truth, and then wonder why things feel hollow. Somewhere, you stopped revealing, and they stopped asking. In this silence, many people turn inward. They tell themselves to be grateful. They suppress the ache. They learn to live without certain needs, convincing themselves that depth is too much to ask for, that maybe this is just what long-term love looks like. Safe, predictable, routine. But love doesn't die in chaos. It dies in stillness. And when you try to explain this kind of loneliness, most people won't understand. Because from the outside, you look like the lucky ones. No drama, no betrayal, just a clean, composed, respectable relationship. But internally, it feels like emotional starvation, not the kind that leaves you broken, but the kind that slowly erodes your sense of being known. This is where the philosophies of Søren Kierkegaard and Viktor Frankl become painfully relevant. Kierkegaard spoke of despair, not as suffering, but as the loss of oneself. Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, argued that the greatest human drive isn't pleasure, but meaning. What happens when your relationship gives you structure, but not meaning? When it offers company, but not connection? You begin to feel a kind of grief, one that's hard to articulate, because it's not about what was done to you. It's about what's no longer happening between you. You're not touched with presence. You're not asked the kind of questions that require real answers. You're not looked at like you're still mysterious, still becoming, still worth exploring. And maybe you've both settled for comfort over risk, for stability over intimacy, for doing well over feeling deeply. In many perfect relationships, both people are trying, but not at the level that matters. You buy gifts, you plan dates, you show up to events, but you don't ask, "What have you been afraid to tell me lately?" You don't say, "I miss the way you used to look at me when I walked into the room." You don't admit, "I don't feel chosen anymore." These are not accusations, they're bridges. But if no one builds them, the distance becomes normal, and in time, it becomes permanent. So what does it take to bring depth back into a relationship that has lost it? It starts with curiosity, real, vulnerable curiosity. The kind that doesn't settle for, "How was your day?" or "Should we order Thai?" but asks, "Where do you feel most alive right now?" or "What are you longing for lately?" It means risking discomfort, risking truth, risking that what you find out may change things, but it may also save things. Because depth doesn't return on its own. It must be summoned, invited, created, not by effort alone, but by the willingness to see and be seen again. In The Second Sex, Simone de Beauvoir wrote, One is not born, but rather becomes a woman. Love, too, is not static. You don't fall into it once and expect it to remain. You become lovers again and again through effort, inquiry, attention. And when that effort stops, even the most functional relationship can become a lonely place. So if you find yourself lying next to someone you adore and still feel unseen, don't dismiss it. That ache is telling you something vital. It's not a flaw in your relationship. It's a call to come back to presence, to risk vulnerability, to go deeper than routine allows. Because no matter how perfect things look, a love that doesn't evolve eventually disappears. Here's a kind of love that keeps us safe, and another kind that makes us feel seen. When we're lucky, they coexist. But in many perfect relationships, only the safety remains, the shared responsibilities, the thoughtful gestures, the familiar routines. It's a love that functions, but doesn't always feel. You go through the motions: breakfast, work, errands, dinner, Netflix. You're not arguing, you're not neglecting, you're just coasting. And in that quiet drift, something essential is being lost. What we often call perfect is sometimes just emotionally inoffensive. No mess, no fire, no failure, but also no rawness, no risk, no surrender. The Stoics believed in acceptance of what is, of what cannot be controlled. But even they warned against confusing acceptance with complacency. The Roman philosopher Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." In relationships, we can waste years in polite detachment, convincing ourselves that comfort is enough, that a clean life equals a full heart. But does it? At some point, many people in long-term relationships confront this question in silence, especially those who tick every box: good communication, stable finances, no abuse, no betrayal, just emotional drought. The tragedy is that most won't talk about it because they feel guilty. How dare you be unhappy when you have everything? So you stay quiet. You smile at the dinner table. You post pictures of your vacations. And inside, you ache for something you can't quite name. Some try to fix it. They initiate date nights, read books on rekindling desire, schedule check-ins. But effort isn't enough without honesty. And honesty, in a perfect relationship, can feel like betrayal, because it means disturbing the peace. It means saying, "I don't feel met here," or worse, "I feel alone with you." These are not easy truths, but they are necessary ones. Philosopher Martin Heidegger once said, "Every man is born as many men and dies as a single one." Intimacy, then, is not just about sharing a home or a bed. It's about revealing who you're becoming. If a relationship doesn't make room for that evolution, you can begin to feel invisible, not for who you were, but for who you are now. And that invisibility is corrosive. It eats away at desire, at playfulness, at the feeling of being chosen. You're appreciated, but no longer pursued, cared for, but no longer curious about, loved, but no longer felt. In many perfect relationships, this isn't anyone's fault. It's not about neglect or resentment. It's about emotional laziness, the slow erosion of intimacy beneath the weight of doing everything else right. Over time, you become excellent roommates, flawless co-parents, even supportive best friends. But something in you still wants to be touched like a secret, looked at like you're still worth discovering. You want to be desired, not just for what you provide, but for who you are. Not just for how well you show up, but for the spark that lives beneath your skin. This is the paradox. Love doesn't always fade because people stop caring. Sometimes, it fades because people stop looking. And when the looking stops, so does the becoming. So what do you do when the structure of the relationship is intact, but the spirit of it feels hollow? You tell the truth, not with blame, but with longing. You say, "I miss how curious we used to be about each other." You say, "I want more than comfort. I want to be known." You say, "We're doing well, but I want us to feel alive again." Not because you're ungrateful, but because you still believe in what this could be, if both of you are willing to go deeper. There is no perfect relationship, but there are honest ones, vulnerable ones, brave ones, the kind where love isn't just performed, but lived, raw, imperfect, evolving. In The Ethics of Ambiguity, Simone de Beauvoir argued that freedom is not about detachment, but about engagement, about choosing, again and again, to be with someone in full presence. This kind of presence is not automatic. It takes effort. It takes risk. It takes the willingness to let go of perfect and reach for something more real. So if you find yourself in a relationship that looks good on the outside, but feels hollow on the inside, don't dismiss the ache. Don't silence it just because you're scared of what it might mean. That ache is your truth knocking. You can ignore it, or you can listen, because even the most perfect relationship cannot sustain itself on structure alone. It needs depth, intimacy, soul, not all at once, not perfectly, but consistently. And if you're willing, both of you, to begin again, to choose each other, not just in duty, but in desire, then what you have isn't broken. It's waiting to become love, not just in form, but in feeling.